Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Chilling Neigh Podcast, your premier VGC podcast. My name is Rashil, aka Konkadonk. I'm joined by Sableye. What is up, man?
It's same old over here, going to the Pikachu hosted events every other weekend and, sometimes occasionally having some fun in here with the Chilling Neigh podcast. Absolutely nothing crazy. Crazy Atlanta regional, though.
Yeah, so we are coming off of Atlanta Regionals, the last, and I don't know if it's the last Reg G event
It's not.
overall. No, right? Because I
There's,
think there's
is
one
it
more.
Monterey, whatever I
Yeah,
think that's that. I think still left.
yeah, but last NA event in Reg G. Um, but the second time we've had a complete mirror match in finals. We had the Tangs early on with Cali Ice, and now we had Koraidon with Iron Crown Psy Spam, and then Flutterchi and Brute Bonnet. Kind of insane. That's something that we hadn't seen for so long, a mirror in finals, and we have it in two regionals in like what, a 2 month span. Absolutely insane.
Yeah.
So yeah, curious on kind of just general thoughts on Atlanta, and like a second mirror match in finals.
No, I think for me, this is just one of those ones where, like we said at the beginning, it's the last Reg G regional for a lot of these players. And why hold something back? You think you've got the sauce, you send the sauce, and it seemed to have worked out here, right? It's a little bit of a weird team conceptually. I played Reg G for a little bit, obviously for a lot of it, but I did stop earlier, and I hadn't seen anything similar to this team. Obviously, we had that Jamie Boyd build from EU era with the Heat Trend, the Brute Bonnet, and the Koraidon stuff. So I wonder if this was spun off of that, or if this was just kind of something they've been working on for a while and figured it was time to break it out into the action. But whatever it was, it worked because that's a first and second place for that team, and that's absolutely insane.
It's insane, and like it's crazy. Like you said, there was no holds barred because it was the last event, and we see four Koraidon. Like Sneaky Koraidon had been like winning a lot of events, just not a lot of like the bigger
Mm-hmm.
events. It had like obviously Wolf had won UIC with it, but there wasn't a lot of like huge events it was winning. It was a lot of winning like special events and stuff. But now like full force, people I guess realizing how strong Koraidon can be, and especially like the sun abusers around it, right? Flutter Chi, obviously, Brute Bonnet getting that boost and like being good into Cali Shadow, stuff like that. So, and can survive, glacial lands with, especially with the boost and stuff. So, it was cool to see Koraidon actually do really well in like four in top eight, and then like none others in top 16, and then a
Yeah.
couple in top 32. So it had a weird, it did really well at the top, basically.
The
It
ones
wasn't
that did
like
well did well.
all over the place. Exactly, exactly. So very cool. Congrats to Daniel Yu for winning. I used he had gotten top 32 at Worlds actually with a really cool
Kyogre,
Kyogre
right?
Masculine Legion team, and I'd played that for a bit, so I was a fan of his going into this. It was really cool. So cool to see him get a recognition that he deserves, and a regional title. So congrats to him. And now we're moving on to Regulation
Yeah,
I.
we're moving on to the format
uh,
that I actually want to play. Regulation I
yeah,
actually want to play this. That's what the I stands for.
yeah. So now we can use two restricteds for anyone that doesn't know. And that the format officially starts in May,
Yep.
but the ladder's been up for, we found out like at the very end of March, I think. And so people have been cooking, and it was a Victory Road tournament. When was this? This was like
2 weeks ago,
April
last
5th
2 weeks
and
ago,
6th.
fifth and sixth.
Yeah. Yep. With in Regulation I that got people cooking, and there's a lot to take away from this. But
Mm-hmm.
first, I think, very clearly, the horse, the ghost horse is gonna, early format, it's just insane. We see so many Cali Shadows
Yes.
in A2 and in top 8, and so let's just dive on into it. All thoughts, regulation I,
Yep.
this tournament. Where do you want to start?
I'm gonna start with the Ghost Horse. It seems like a very fitting spot, and it was obviously very, very good in single restricted, right? It never actually did end up winning that big event in Regulation G, at least post Worlds. I don't believe it did. I don't think it ever won anything, and we
It
kept
won
calling it. We kept
LA.
calling it was gonna win something, and I don't think it ever did. But
Yeah.
regardless, now this is a huge boost for it, having that second restricted beside it. And obviously you can say this about a lot of restricted, so before everybody immediately gets under keyboards and is like, oh, you can say this about every restricted in the comment section, let's calm down for a second. um yes, every restricted in theory gets better because you're able to pair it with some better restricted that actually support its toolkit better. However, Calyrex Shadow, it now doesn't have to be that only piece anymore. And that is a huge buff that I think needs to be mentioned for it. Because back when it had to be the only piece, you had to run, that setup. You had to find a way, you had to build your team on how do I get Cali Shadow into this position. Now, that's not necessarily the case. You still have the option to get Cali Shadow into that position. But a lot of these teams that we're seeing this different move as that third slot on the Cali Shadow. We're seeing the Ghost move, which is Astral Barrage, the Psychic, or the Psyshock, or the Expanding Force if you've got the Indeedee there. And then you've got kind of a tech move and protect. And I think that really opens it up. We've seen Will-O-Wisp, we've seen Encore, we've seen Disable. We've still seen some nasty plot variants as well. Just tons of options for this, and it just becomes that late game piece now where, your other restricted can do a bunch of stuff up early, and then late game after all the speed control's gone, after everything's been chipped. Oh, say hi to my Ghost Horse that's probably holding a Focus Sash, which was at least the item of choice early on. So I think this Pokemon's going nowhere. It's it's the most slappable restricted. I don't know what to put with this piece. Cali Shadow. It's a very good piece. It's going to be around.
Yeah, agreed. And I think like there was, I mean, everyone in the community was kind of saying Regulation I, Kali Shadow Zama is gonna be the pairing,
Mm-hmm.
which it's still. I mean, I
It's
think
still the pairing.
we'll get to that pairing in a second because I still think it'll be the best pairing. But we see it with like in this tournament with the VR tournament, we see Kali Shadow Zama winning, but then we see Kali Shadow Miraidon, we see Kali Shadow Zacian, we see it paired with Pagos, Koraidon. Let's
Yeah.
see if there's any other like
There's probably
yeah,
a couple
basically
other
every
crazy ones, but I haven't. No, no, actually, there isn't.
yeah, those are the ones that I'm seeing. But still, I mean, wide variety, like you said, it's very slappable. I mean, especially when you can't just Terra normal, right? And say, okay, I got my immunity now. Well, now you have to deal with a Miraidon Electro Drift. How are you gonna resist that?
Yep.
Or Zamazenta Body Press,
Yep.
or Zacian Play Rough, Behemoth Blade, whatever it is, Koraidon Collision Course. So there's a lot of the Tropicos one is what I want to also spend some time on too, because
Don't get me started
I
on
feel like
that
that's
core.
that's a whole different one. But Pally Shadow is going to be, I think, let's see, what was the usage? It was by far the most used in day
67
one
something?
and in day two. It was so 37.8% usage in day
Yeah.
one and 53% usage in day two. So over half the teams in day two had Kali Shadow.
Yes. And I
That's
think it was
insane.
like
Like,
67 of Top Cut had it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have to
that's
count this one
crazy.
myself. 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 10 out of 15. So that's what? Yeah, about 67. Yeah.
That's insane. And like Kali Shadow had more like usually in restricted formats, right? Like the partners like Instant Urshrilla, right, are like the ones that okay, like they have probably the most usage out of any mon, and then like okay, there's some restricteds, whatever it is. Kali Shadow had more usage in day two than any other mon, including Instant, including Ursh, including Rilla. That's like absurd to me. And the fact is, like, now you can't just build teams where it's like, okay, I have double dark types, I have a normal type, right? Like, I can build my team to resist and make sure that Astral Barrage is not going to sweep me because now you have to deal with the partner, right? Now you have to deal with, okay, maybe there's like Kali Shadow Kyogre, or Kali Shadow Zama, or Kali Shadow, Koraidon that's just gonna, okay, now the partner is gonna nuke me if I start to Terra, right? Or, so it's just, it's gonna be something that you really have to keep in mind while team building where it's like okay I need to have answers like even your ensign now has to be like I've seen people like try to do niche tears where it's like, okay, I have to do bug so that I can live an Astral Barrage and a body
Body press,
press
yep.
or a poison, but then if you're poisoned, you're weak to psychic. So like now your instant isn't even a good like Kali Shadow counter anymore.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be tricky. I think that's the main key is like who are the people that are gonna figure out this Kali Shadow puzzle where you can reliably and consistently get around it without just the use of wide guard. Because,
Hmm.
like you said, people are running tech moves. Like if you get into an encore to say like encore's always been terrible or terrible to face, right? With Whimsicott or with Screamtail, and now you don't have to run Screamtail, which is a terrible mon. Like not terrible mon, but
No, no,
it's
no.
not
Say
doing
it.
anything.
Say it. It's a terrible mon.
I hate Screamtail so much. It's not a mon that's gonna do like negative damage with Dazzling Gleam, right? It's a
Yeah.
mon that's like, okay, if I protect in front of you, now I'm gonna get Encore locked. Or if I don't protect, I'm gonna get Astral Barrage to death.
Yep.
So it is going to be a pain to deal with, but that's gonna be the key. Is the best players are gonna have to figure out how to deal with Kali Shadow and all the tech moves that it can run. You
And I
know?
think that's something to be said about the double restricted format, and that's what's going to keep it, I think, a little bit more fresh. Because I think Reg G was kind of okay at the beginning, and it got very stale very fast. And I kind of knew that because it's a single restricted formats of Reg G and anything of the like tend to be pretty solved pretty quickly, tend to get stale pretty fast because there's only so much you can do, right? Especially when it's like, well, if I run this restricted, I'm missing out on an opportunity to run this better one. But with dual restricted, it always finds a way to open itself up in a way where you can kind of get away with like some really cool pairings that end up serving a niche that you wouldn't necessarily expect, right? Like the Miraidon Lunala, which I kind of saw going into this event that was like, yeah, it's probably going to be pretty decent. I didn't think it was going to get third at this event. So seeing it with immediate success is pretty cool. Kali Shadow Koraidon is a very cool adaptation as well. I like those cores, right? Like I think there's a lot of cores you're able to just utilize in ways that you're gonna have a well-built team around them, right? Reg G felt like in order to have a well-built team, you needed to have like these 2 or 3 restricteds. Whereas this one, you have so many different pairings that you can kind of fit to your comfort zone. And dual restricted formats historically are comfort. If you are comfortable with something, you are in a good spot. So I would recommend right now finding that restricted core that's kind of your comfort core. Not saying you have to play this solely, but if you're thinking about going to events and you're trying to do as well as possible, at least early metagame, comfort's going to be your call. Because generally
Yeah.
speaking, with dual restricted, you're going to have a lot of answers to a lot of things, and it's just going to come down to playing well. And when you're comfortable with something, you're more likely to play well than when you're uncomfortable with something. It's just the nature of the game, and I think that's definitely what I would lean towards, at least going into Milwaukee in the next few early events, where you just get that comfort team going, and it's early format. You have no clue what you're gonna see, so you might as well be comfortable with what you have.
Agreed. Totally agree. I want to shift a little bit to just looking at these like restricted usage
Absolutely.
sets a little bit because I think there's some interesting patterns here. So weather kind of performed really poorly. We have like Kyogre, there was 29 in day one and only three made it to day two. Groudon 21 in day one and
None
none
mid.
made day two,
Groudon's still a fraud.
which
Don't,
is
don't Groudon fraud.
yeah. I mean, there's Koraidon. So Koraidon did do like I mean there was five in day two out of 45 in day one. So still not like the best conversion.
Hmm.
But not terrible. 13% of day two usage is not terrible.
Yeah, and
Um, and then like what's interesting is so I think we got to get into this. Tropicos had 26 in day one and 10% usage, like a little less than 10% usage. It was 21% of day two.
yeah,
Like eight of them made it to day two, which was like the best conversion rate of basically anything outside of Cali Shadow. Um, so like I know there was a lot of people like we expect Zamazenta, we expect Koraidon to be good. Like everyone was talking about Tropicos' downfall. What are your thoughts on Tropicos? And then also want to hear your thoughts on Tropicos Cali Shadow
okay.
because that is an interesting pairing.
Incoming rant. No, Terapagos is like, it's a decent Pokemon. Okay, I personally do not like this thing. I think it is probably one of the worst restricted we've ever had in a long time. But that's not the point here. Okay, we're here to analyze how it fits into the metagame. And in double restricted formats, as much as I want to trash on this Pokemon, it's surprisingly gonna be okay. because when I look at it and I look at the other restricted that are doing well, Cali Shadow, which we just talked about for like 5 minutes, and I said it was going to probably be slapped on a lot of teams. Terapagos beats it. Weather compositions, which are also probably going to be slapped onto a lot of teams into Koraidon and the Kyogre. Terapagos likes going up against those because you're able to shut off weather, right? Lunala, which now tends to be one of the bigger options on a team where you get wide guard, but that's a ghost type. It doesn't like Terapagos, right? The only thing Terapagos really doesn't love, I mean, is like the Miraidon and the Calyrex and the Zacian and stuff, right? And a little bit of the Koraidon Zama, right? But a lot of those times that Zamazenta that Terapagos doesn't love has a Calyrex on it. So, Terapagos is useful in that matchup. Whereas before it was like, yeah, you pulled Zamazenta, Zamazenta's rising in usage, Terapagos goes down. Now it's like Terapagos doesn't necessarily go down anymore because the partner with Zamazenta is something that Terapagos is capable of beating. So it becomes one of those weird spots where the Pokemon I don't think fundamentally should be doing well in this format. But I do think just because of the nature of the things that it does beat tend to be common partners for things that it would lose to, seems to be a little bit of a an uptick for it. Now that's kind of like the general aspect of a restricted format. You want to complement your other restricted. So generally speaking, Terapagos, which would normally beat the Cali Shadow. That's why Cali Shadows are now paired with, those fighting types that would beat the Terapagos, right? So that's just the nature of the restricted format. But I definitely expected a bigger fall off than whatever it was doing. It's surprisingly held up.
Yeah. It's interesting because I am also a Pagos hater, but yet I have been recently trying Cali Shadow Pagos and playing it quite a bit. And I realized that a lot of these Terapagos teams, there's a couple of keys to it. Like you said, it's pretty really good into Cali Shadow, right? And especially these Combine setup sets, it can be super good into Miraidon. There's so many good special restricteds like Miraidon, Cali Shadow, right? Lunala, like you were saying. Once you Terra, you get rid of the electric train after Combine boost. Miraidon's not doing much to you, right? With those Combine and with the fake out bros, you got Incin, Rilla, you got Follow Me usually with an Ogerpon form. You can really protect that Tropicos and beat a lot of these special restricteds. Where it becomes a little weird with team building is that the team feels like it's a Terapagos team with a restricted put onto it, like a second restricted put onto it to help the Terapagos. It doesn't really feel like it's a Cali Shadow
Yeah.
team. Marco Silva did something really cool where he has basically double setup and then just the balance core next to it. And so
Mm-hmm.
he's like, okay, it can either be a Cali Shadow team, or it can be a Terapagos team, or I can have both out at once and just try to sweep you with double spread moves. Um, where it's still weird is that Zamazenta and Koraidon, people at the end of Reg G realized I think how strong Koraidon is, and now are using it even more where they don't have to have it as the main restricted. And same with Zamazenta, where it was okay, it was struggling a bit towards in Reg G 2.0. Actually, didn't really do much of anything in Reg G 2.0. But now that it's support restricted, it's going to be really good, and it's really hard to protect around. Especially Zamazenta against wide guard and body press, right? And then even Koraidon, right? With collision course, you can't really intimidate, right? Same with body press, you can't intimidate body press, and you can't intimidate with clear amulet. And it's difficult to get around those pieces, but the team building aspect of it, I think there's gonna be a lot more stuff disable. I was testing out with Cali Shadow on Tropicos to disable body press stuff like that or wide guard. Um, and just some mons next to it that don't necessarily need to Terra. I think that's the biggest key
Mm-hmm.
because really, when you're bringing Tropicos, you really want to Terra. It's really not. Its stats are just very mediocre if it doesn't Terra, right? Terra Shell is the
Yeah.
best thing it's got going for it pre-Terra, and then once that's kind of out the window, you really want to utilize that Terra to especially get rid of stuff like Miraidon's Terrain, right? Koraidon's Sun, Kyogre Weather, whatever it is. So it's an interesting restricted. I think how much we all thought it was going to fall off is not going to be the case. It still will be around, especially because it's going to be good into Cali Shadow, and Cali Shadow is going to be so good.
Yeah.
But it is going to be, I think, generally restrictive in team building. It's going to be very much protect the turtle, and have a restricted that doesn't necessarily need to Terra next to it, like a Focus Sash, Kali Shadow.
Yeah.
Like a Koraidon that doesn't necessarily need to Terra immediately anymore, right? Like it can play its role where it's gonna come in after Pagos has maybe done enough damage where it can get one flame charge off and then just it doesn't need to survive that long as it
Yeah.
gets enough damage off.
That
So
that Terapagos
it's a weird.
Koraidon team coming out of Japan is it's wild. You know what it kind of reminds me of? Because like in theory,
What?
it does make a little bit of sense where it's like I kind of see what the two are doing for each other, but they're also kind of just turning
Mhm.
each other off in a sense. At least the Terapagos turning off the Koraidon Sun.
But yeah,
It kind of reminds me of like back in the day with like the dual primals, and like it didn't really make a lot of sense. You know, you had your Groudon and your Kyogre. If you had your Kyogre and then Groudon switched in, you would be in Sun, and your Kyogre would be pretty much effectively useless on its water move because was it Primordial Sun or whatever it was the ability was called? You literally could not use a
yeah,
water move, right? And it
right.
really seemed like at the time, like back in the day, I was bad, so I didn't really analyze that. But like it just seems kind of counterintuitive. Why would I want to have one turn off one and then the other turn off the other, right? Like why would I ever want that from my restricted composition, right? But like it made sense in a sense that a lot of people weren't prepared to have to deal with both on a team. And I think that's similar to what we're seeing here where yeah, okay, I got my Terapagos answers, I have my Koraidon answers, I know how to cycle around to common cores with them, and then all of a sudden, why is Koraidon and Terapagos together? Uh-oh, right? And I feel like that's in a sense where that composition is really going to get to the next level. However, that being said, it's still kind of annoying when trying to play a composition like this, and it really does take like strong positioning because you're going to get to a spot where you're going to need to terrestrialize your Terapagos, and you're also going to need to attack with Koraidon. But if you do that, you're hindering your Koraidon, which sometimes may be okay, right? I may be overestimating the impact of removing your own sun. It might not be that big of a deal. However, overall, I think at some point it's going to be a problem. Just how in like Reg G, at some point Kyogre was going to miss that Origin Pulse. It's similar to that. At some
Yeah,
point, you're gonna be in that position where you're gonna can end up being like pinning yourself in a way, and it's like a little less than ideal for that. But the composition itself is cool, right? Unlike the Kali
yeah,
Shadow Terapagos. Kali Shadow Terapagos, in my opinion, breaks everything I've known about a restricted format for my like last 4 times playing a restricted format. I can kind of see a little bit of like, oh yeah, it's the concept here is cool, you don't Kali Shadow doesn't like playing the mirrors, so you get something that beats the Kali Shadow. Terapagos doesn't like playing the Zamazenta, so you kind of get something with a broken Kali Shadow mon that can deal with those fighting types, deal with the Zamazentas, especially if you're running like a Will-O-Wisp or an Encore variant. You can kind of get around those Zamazentas a little bit easier, especially for that Terapagos, especially if it's like super bulky, right? So like I see it in a sense like that, but it just doesn't seem to like I don't know. You know that you guys know the phrase like the math isn't mathing. That's what my brain does when I see this composition. Like it's probably decent, it's probably good, but I see Terapagos, Kali Shadow, and my brain just stops working. I'm sorry, my brain just stops working when I see this team comp.
yeah. It's weird because like both don't want to face wide guard, right? And
Yeah,
like you don't really want to like I don't know. I've been playing it a bit and like you get into a position against like a opposing Kali Shadow and Zama and they can just kind of wide guard and you can't really do much and like you just have to like
yeah.
play some weird
I,
game and like in the meantime they can just body press you and you just die
yeah,
and it's like
yeah. I
well
was
I
playing
guess I
versus it.
lose.
I ended up playing versus it on stream, and I had an Umbreon because I was testing like Koraidon Umbreon stuff for fun, and I just had Snarl.
Yeah.
I literally led Umbreon and
Yeah.
clicked Snarl. They couldn't do anything.
Yeah, I face like a like so Scarf Chi is like a
Yep.
big problem too, and it's just like you just lock into Snarl and you just kind of lose, and
Right?
so there's just like or you face Koraidon and it flame charges you once, and then you just kind of lose, and so it's just really weird positions. I don't know, like I'm not a Pagos player or a Kali Shadow player historically, so I'm sure like Marco and all these other guys that did well with it are way better at using
Oh
this
yeah.
team than I
Yeah, yeah.
am. But I just like I feel like you get into so many weird positions that just doesn't feel like an optimal team. But I don't know, like
It worked clearly.
it may just be completely proven wrong when when it comes to major events. Yeah, it clearly works here. So I don't know. It's an odd one.
Yeah. Uh,
Um,
Thoughts on Miraidon? Now that I think it's a good time to move on, unless you had something else to say. Didn't want to cut
yeah,
you off, but
no, yeah, I think that's a good one. I like, I think Murata. So, like you were saying, like it feels like most restricteds get better. So, like in this restricted format, because like
yeah,
again, you have just so many more tools. So it's weird to say, and Miraidon's been like the best, or maybe not the best, but like as one, Arabiga obviously has been like the insane team for all of Reg G. So Miraidon's clearly been so good, but I feel like it gets a bit of a boost. Well,
it gets a
positive and
boost.
negative. It's it's so strong now as just like a nuke. Like it can just be like a side nuke that like you have to pay attention to. But if you're paying attention to that one, then Kali Shadows maybe crushing you, or Kali Ice is crushing you, or there's another mod next to it. But at the same time, it's gonna I think take a little hit from the fact that like if you were running, in single restricted, if Rhydon was your restricted, you were facing down, a bunch of different other restricteds, and not all of them were Kali Shadow, right? Like there was a lot of other ones that were slower than you. Now, more than half the teams have Kali Shadow. There's a mon that's faster than you. If they get enough chip damage on you,
Mm-hmm.
one Astral Barrage is just gonna KO you before you can even attack now. So I think we're gonna see a little bit more experimentation with moving off of specs and maybe some scarf variants, because now you don't have to do necessarily as much damage, but that's also a
I,
little weird because if they
that's
just have
fair.
tailwind then you're kind of screwed. So um or maybe some variants with protect. I don't know, I think there's going to be a little bit more experimentation with Miraidon before, just because like we were saying, like with Kali Shadow and with whatever, you can run Focus Sash now because you don't need as much burst
Mm-hmm.
damage. And same with Miraidon. I don't think you're gonna need as much burst damage right away. You just need to be able to like two shot everything, because you're not necessarily gonna be able to. There's gonna be maybe more Rillabooms, whatever it is.
I don't
And
know.
it's also good into Amoonguss, which Amoonguss has been, or like Miraidon setting up Electric Train has been historically. Amoonguss has been one of the best mons, especially in restricted formats, right? And now, I don't, actually, is there even where is Among Us?
Just
Is there any
like
Among Us?
literally top four.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
okay. Yeah,
it's
but
still there.
other than that,
Don't sleep on this guy. He's
yeah,
still
okay.
there.
He's still there. Okay, yeah. And then there's another one at
Yeah.
19th. Okay, but I mean, I feel like everyone disrespects Among Us early on and no one
Mm-hmm.
uses it, and then it comes back and it's like
Mm-hmm.
one of the best ones. So could be good. Miraidon could be helpful into that, but I'm like a little surprised that we didn't see like Miraidon. I feel like the two biggest restricted duos that were like hyped up before we actually started playing this format were Kali Shadow Zama and Miraidon Kali Ice.
Mm-hmm.
And Miraidon Kali Ice didn't convert super well. We have like one
In
or
11th.
two in top 16
Yeah,
actually.
I think
Um,
I think on this it's one of those ones like similar to what you said, where the Miraidon kind of has the opportunity to adapt. I think the
yeah,
concept of Miraidon, I think Specs is still probably the correct item, or at least early on it's still the correct item. I think the adaptation
yeah,
really needs to come from the rest of the team and what restricted you're putting it with, right? Especially with these Kali Ice Miraidon ones, where we see a lot of people are just trying to put a Calyrex Ice on the Aerobega team, right? Which is probably gonna work decently well. But when I tried something like that, it felt a little clunky to me. I kind of had to get the lead right. The positioning didn't flow as well as I wanted it to, right? And then the
yeah,
same kind of worked the other way, where it was like I had these Calyrex Ice teams and I wanted to put a Miraidon on it. Obviously, that's kind of like the concept we see in 11th there with the Calyrex Miraidon, Pelipper, Urshifu, Ogerpon, Iron Hands. That's kind of like you get the fake out Trick Room stuff, right? That is a Cali Ice team with a Miraidon teched onto it, right? That's kind of the approach that
yeah,
way. But I truly think that composition needs to be different than both of those. I don't think you can do Miraidon on a Cali Ice, and I don't think you can do Cali Ice on a Miraidon. Yeah, you'll get some decent success, but I think to take that composition to the next level, you kind of have to, merge things a little bit differently than kind of just slapping them onto the other team. And I think we're going to see that a lot. I would be very surprised if it didn't have a good run in this upcoming VR tournament this weekend. By the way, there's a VR tournament this weekend if anybody wants to play in it, just as a heads up. Uh, just throwing that out there. But I would be very surprised if it didn't start seeing more conversion rates this time around. Now that the format's kind of been out for a little bit, people know what they need to go up against and not what they need to go up against. So once the meta settles a little bit, we'll see these teams I think adapt and really take full stage. Because I still think Miraidon is the easiest way to do damage in this format, hands down. It's your fastest damage dealer that actually sets up with all the multipliers ridiculously easily. And you can put a lot of pins on that way. It's going to be a good mon. I think Kali Ice works for it because, you're just getting around some of those Rillabooms into grass types, into ground types. It's a good composition. It's just going to take a little bit to, I think, fall into place.
Yeah, I agree. I think like again speaking against Kali Shadow Zama, right? Like you don't want to face against Wide Guard and Kali Shadow's faster than you, so you have to find some like I think some and like Wide Guard just being everywhere is going to be something that the horses and Kyogre or whatever it is has to get around. Like have to find good ways to deal damage while you're still like stuck in this like wide guard. Especially Kali hates facing down Zama, right? So you really got to figure out some ways to some creative ways to deal with that. And it's interesting because I've seen like some of these teams, the ones that aren't just Arvega with Kali Ice, like the other ones tend to drop Rig, which now opens you up to like the fake out cycling, which Miraidon doesn't really love. And like we see a lot of Rillabooms, so it's gonna be a big, and I think appropriately because it's in response to Miraidon partially. And so it's gonna be interesting to see how Miraidon teams adapt to deal with that, with all those Rillabooms as well as just like being a little bit slower than all the Kali Shadows that are gonna be everywhere. Um, Thoughts on like interesting partner mons outside of the restricteds that may pop up or that popped up here that you think are pretty strong? I think like first one I want to talk about is Ditto because I think it's
Mm-hmm.
hilarious and like I thought we might see it like it was seeing some usage on like Koraidon teams, not really much else on Reg G, but we see a couple here in top 8 and like it's just hilarious because like you can really have I mean I don't think it's usually used as like all right we'll just have three restricteds for the game, but sometimes it is and sometimes it's like all right this one restricted is really bad into this matchup and I'll just bring Ditto to copy your Kali Shadow and now have all the boosts or Kali Ice or your Zacian. It has the cool interaction with Intrepid Sword where you get the +1 and then you get the activation again, so you get the basically +2 Zacian,
Yep.
or +2 Zama, same thing. So I think that's going to be something that sees a little bit more usage. It's still a little awkward piece. It's like that sixth mon that has to be like the most flexible, mon. You have to know how to play Ditto well,
Yeah.
I think, but it's something that I think will see more usage than it did in the single restricted
I,
format.
I fully agree. I think we're gonna see a lot of Ditto, especially as the format develops and we start seeing, like the cores fine tuned. I know I'm gonna say this a lot. It's like the cores haven't really been fine tuned. We know Calyrex Zamazenta is gonna be good. We know Calyrex Miraidon is gonna be good. We know, right? We know what cores are probably gonna be good, but we haven't seen how they really finish off their compositions yet in a common way. And once we see that, we're gonna see a lot more Ditto. I think Ditto is a Pokemon that in theory is a very simple add to a team. Oh hey, you know what? Boom, Ditto. I don't know what to put in this last slot. Easy Ditto slap. But it's so much easier, so much harder and more difficult to actually pilot it at a top level than I think a lot of people actually give it credit for. There is so much thinking that goes into playing Ditto. Do I want to lead it? Do I want to
Yep.
have making sure the two Pokemon I lead are on the correct sides so that if something dies, I get more likely to have my Ditto in front of what I want my Ditto into, right? So much positioning and small micro interactions like that you normally wouldn't think of when you don't have a Ditto, you now have to think of. So I think in order to excel with Ditto, it really does benefit from like a metagame that's a little bit more like known and but so early format,
Mhm.
like you're gonna see it because it's just naturally gonna be good. Anytime you can get a funny third restricted button, it's pretty cool. But I think as the format develops, you're gonna see it more and more and used a little bit more, quote unquote, in the smarter way or in a way where it's like, wow, that was like some exceptional Ditto gameplay. And I think that's really when we're gonna start seeing it. But obviously, it's just a Ditto. Anytime you can get a third restricted, anytime you can maybe steal and intimidate from your opponent, lots of options. You're effectively playing the game with 11 pieces. So I don't know.
Yep. Agreed. I also think like this is a mon that I feel like underperformed in this tournament, but I think is going to be like such a good mon for the rest of the format, or once the format actually like really starts, is Grimmsnarl.
Yes.
I think like we've seen it do well in Sword and Shield format, and obviously this is different. And I do want to talk about how this restricted format relates or is different than previous. But I think Grimmsnarl, like from experience from facing it and like just like the sets I've played and stuff, like screens, like making already bulky restricteds even bulkier, or even like frailer restricteds that can now run a little bit bulk, but
Yep.
like now making them a little bit bulkier, not turning one hit like OKOs into two hit KOs and two hit KOs into three hit KOs is huge, like
Mm-hmm.
extremely important. And then Thunder Wave spam is
Yep.
incredibly annoying. Like if you can get one paralysis on a restricted, because this format can be more fast paced at times. One paralysis can just cost you the game.
Yep.
And even just the speed drop, like getting a Thunder Wave on a Kali Shadow,
Mm-hmm.
now you've like Kali Shadow has two things going for it: fast, strong. Now you've gotten rid of the fast component, right? And
Yeah.
it's frail. You know, like it can just get KO'd before it gets an Astral Barrage off, and it can just Grimmsnarl can sit in front of Kali Shadow no problem, run like Foul Play or Spirit Break, and now it's either doing a huge amount of damage to your Kali Shadow or reducing its special attack. And same with, Foul Play into Kali Ice. So I think Grimmsnarl, and it has, I mean, other options too. Like you can
Oh,
run
absolutely.
Fake Out on it, you can run Fake Tears. There's a lot of options on it. I think Thunderwave spam, like we've seen, you know, all the way back in the Ray Rizzo days, Thunderwave spam always good. And so
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be a mon that is going to be here to stay and very strong
I agree.
on several comps.
I agree, and I know
On.
you were saying the format can get like faster paced, and sometimes all you need is one Thunder Wave, right? But I think something else
Yeah,
that's not always mentioned in terms of Thunder Wave, because that always feels like when we're talking about Thunder Wave, it's always about, oh, the format's so fast you can turn them off for a turn and you take advantage, right? That feels
yeah,
like it always gets brought up. Something else that I want to bring up is just the nature of maybe like if someone's trying to slow the game down and you have
yeah,
that thunder wave
yeah,
out there, it's also very, very annoying to go through because instead of just getting one para, maybe 2 out of the 5 turns, they're gonna get paired. The longer that game goes, eventually they're gonna keep getting paired, right? That 25% is constantly there. If that game keeps going and starts dragging out, at some point that is gonna work in the Grimmsnarl player's favor, right? So like, yeah, it's great if I can get that immediate para in a fast-paced game, awesome. But even on some of the longevity games, on the games that take a little bit longer, you get those pairs over time, and I think something like that is definitely a long way. I mean, in Reg G, I was playing up against Kylan, very good Canadian player. Goes to my locals. They had their world's team, and they had Thunderwave on the Fluttermane, right? And we both established at this point that the matchup was probably in Kyogre's favor because it was Kali Ice versus Kyogre. Kyogre had a very, very good matchup into that. But just because of the nature of the game and the cycling that I had to position, I couldn't really
yeah,
stop Thunderwave from that Fluttermane getting put onto my Pokemon. And at that point, I had to all of a sudden hit my old pulses. I had to not get paralyzed on all of my pieces, right? And the game just became very, very frustrating from my end because I needed to cycle and make sure that my pivot moves were going off. I needed to make sure that my origin pulses were getting the appropriate chip damage. So I was getting paralyzed like 6, 7 times in a set, and it was like, this is incredibly frustrating. This matchup is supposed to be good, and then all of a sudden, because of
yep,
Thunderwave, it's just not. It's just such a disruptance, especially because you can't really. You want to plan. It's like the Sneasler almost in a way. Like I gotta plan. I gotta play around the option that sleep could happen,
yeah,
but I could also just stay in and hope sleep doesn't happen, right? So it's like, at what point do I say, you know what, I just have to eat the Thunderwave and Opals, or at what point do I say that, you know what, I'm gonna pretend it's not there, right? Like, it's an interesting
yeah.
dance, and I'm curious to see if that's a dance that keeps up for all of Reg G.
Yeah, and like you were saying, like the slower teams, like you kind of force your opponent to either sit there and like just risk paralysis every turn because they're trying to slow play it,
Right.
or kind of make them play more offensive because like and
Yep.
like not the way that they want to play because they're like, you know what, I could get paralyzed any turn, like I gotta start taking KOs, and it makes Grimmsnarl like a pseudo follow me. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like you really want to take out the Grimmsnarl because
Yeah.
it's gonna paralyze my whole team, and that's a huge pain. So now I'm targeting down this Grimmsnarl when there's two restricteds
Restricted.
on like that have to do it. Like
Yep.
it's so
It's
I think it's
interesting.
gonna be yeah
It's gonna be a
strong.
very, very good mod. I
Uh,
think another couple shout outs I want to give quickly are
yep.
Tornadus and Whimsicott. They're gonna be good guys. No secret there. I think they were good in Regulation G. I don't think that's a secret. But one I really want to see is kind of actually like Brute Bonnet. It is something that I don't think saw a lot of play outside of a Koraidon team, and I don't think it's going to see play outside of Koraidon teams. However, I could maybe see it in this format on a not Koraidon team in a sense where, maybe if I end up playing it and they give me the sun, right? Is the dark typing just that much more valuable now on this quote unquote dark type Amoonguss against all of these Kali Shadows, right? And then if the opponent
Yeah.
gives you sun, well, now I can get whatever Quark Drive boost or Protosynthesis boost that I want, right? I do think you're going to see it more on the Koraidon teams or on the Groudon teams, but I am curious to see if this Brute Bonnet guy actually holds out because we saw it win Atlanta and get second at Atlanta. We saw Jamie Boyd have success with it as well nearing the end of Reg G. So I wonder if now that there is these second restricted, there is more sun in the metagame. I'm curious to see if Brute Bonnet sticks around. It's interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Like I've seen like just with Covert Cloak, Sucker Punch, Spore, right? Like Seed Bomb, it's just like a nuisance, right, to deal with and like it's a little bit faster than Amoonguss, so some mons that maybe like would typically outspeed Amoonguss are not gonna get outsped by Brute. I could see it on like maybe a rain comp with boost energy or maybe like um maybe a Kali Ice like Trick Room comp. So I agree. I think Brute Bonnet's a mon to watch out for. I think like it's weird, right? Still
Yeah.
because like now every mon that's good into like every dark type, right? Every mon that's good into Kali Shadow, a little like worse into Zamazenta or Koraidon and stuff. So it's gonna be interesting, but I think we're gonna see Brute Bonnet and Amoonguss, some sort of sleep. Like we were saying, like same thing with paralysis.
Yeah.
One turn, getting a mon to sleep for one turn or two turns is like can swing the game insanely in your favor.
Yeah. Agreed.
Um, I also think that we're gonna see like we saw the Ogre Pond forms do well, or like Rock
Oh
Pond
yeah.
and Fire Pond, and I think they're like it was cool because I feel like once Rock the Ogre Pond forms were introduced, Rock Pond took the longest to actually be good,
Mm-hmm.
but now it's like very good, and it's probably like I mean way better than way better showing than Wellspring. Wellspring was like the dominant form, that and Hearthflame, and Wellspring did not do well at all in this tournament. I think I've been testing out Hearthflame a bit, and I think it's going to be very good as an offensive piece, especially I think Grassy Glide with
Mm-hmm.
Rillaboom, like running double grass and running like Grassy Glide and just being able to like Terra Fire, like just Grassy Glide, KO a Kali Shadow before it can even move something like that is really strong. And then Ivy Cudgel obviously very strong into Zamazenta. So I think that double grass core could be something we see stick around quite a bit because I think it's just going to be very good offensively and also provides with that follow me support and the Rillaboom terrain. So that's going to be very good. I think Chi is going to
Yep.
be like incredible. Scarf Chiyu is like so good into Kali Shadow, especially the ones that are running right now, which is like not running any coverage move outside of like they're just running Astral Barrage and Psychic or Astral Barrage and Tech moves. And so that's going to be super good into obviously Zamazenta Kali Shadow, where you're threatening an Overheat, you're threatening Snarl, you're threatening Dark Pulse. And Fluttermane is that partner because a lot of these Zamazentas want to run like Terra Dragon, at least early on, and so having that Moonblast is going to be very
Mm-hmm.
good. So kind of like some of these are like the similar partners you'd expect. I think we're also going to see like the rise of like with these mons some more tech moves like Whimsicott. You were saying I could see more Endeavor
Okay.
Whimsicott, and some more Endeavor in general. Being able to just get them on down to 1 HP like from your Focus Sash, and just KO it immediately is really strong. I ran into Endeavor like Focus Sash Clefairy on a Cali Ice team the other day, and it just boomed me. It like
Yeah.
literally I was like Focus, that's weird. And then Endeavor, like I had like I had Tropicos like with Terra Shell attack,
Yeah.
whatever.
No, no, you don't have Terra
Endeavor
Shell
like
anymore.
and I'm done. And I was like, oh
Yep.
okay,
Yeah.
that's fun.
Yeah, you get to
And
do a
then
lot of
I
cool
gotta say,
things in restricted metas, and I think that's something that double restricted opens up. And I think
yeah,
that's one of the reasons I enjoy the double restricted so much. I'm a little worried about this double restricted format being a little bit too aggressive than my liking would exist. Just because of the terrestrialization, you're able to kind of go on the offense when you need it and all of a sudden get out of bad spots that normally would be bad spots with a bit of the ability to Terra, right? So it is definitely an interesting spot to see. But like, as always, it's early format. We're going to see a bunch of hyper offense. We're going to see aggressive teams. And then as the format develops, we're going to see more and more of these balanced comps kind of rise up and slow the pace down. It's the nature of the evolution of a format. It's no doubt in my
yeah.
mind. Although I am a little worried it's going to take either a little longer for these balanced teams to come out, or like I don't think these true balanced teams are really going to be there because there's so many different ways to punch holes in them now. It's going to be a little bit gonna be a little shaky.
Yeah, it's a quick like it's gonna be a quick format in the sense that we have like couple regionals in May, we have NAIC in June, and then there's Worlds,
Yep.
and so it's gonna be a little bit of fast-paced development. We always see some development online as well, in between Worlds and or NAC and Worlds, and like people experimenting with stuff. But it's gonna be interesting to see. Um, I want to quickly, like, because we haven't talked about it yet, I want to talk a little bit about like your experience with double restricted formats compared to how you think it will be in this one, and like I'll quickly touch on like I think it's I mean for people like for me I only played Sword and Shield and now Scarlet Violet in terms of VGC, and I think it's funny because like you'd expect with Dynamax it was like Dynamax it was extremely aggressive, but at the same time there was still the Grim Snarl screens, right? There was still like that balance, like a lot of like attempt at balance play with the Kyogre teams and stuff like that. And so I think like you were saying, it always starts really fast, and then it does always slow down. I think with Terra is interesting because like Cali, like stuff like Cali Shadow,
Hmm.
and even Cali Ice, like the like stuff that's maybe Cali Shadow like typically frail, right?
Yep.
But now, and I don't know if it's gonna run more defensive Terras, but I feel like it will. And like I've seen a lot of Terra Dark recently.
Yep.
But like you can make it more bulky, right? Where it can stick around on the field more and run more Astral Barrage, like click Astral Barrage more and more. So I think it's interesting to see how it's going to become more and more bulky. But curious on like team building and like
Yeah.
just in general approach to restricted format in your experience.
Yeah, so I mean, similar to your Cali Shadow point, this is kind of why I'm a little concerned about the format staying a little faster, because these aggressive teams, which would normally, launch a, let's just say, Life Orb Astral Barrage off, do, 50, 60 to each Pokemon. A lot of the times you could leverage that and be like, okay, I'll take the trade. I'll eat 50, 60 on my Pokemon, and I don't know, click knockoff back and kill this Calyrex. Now, it's a lot less of being able to do that in a sense where if they click Terra Dark Life Orb, Astral Barrage, do 50, 60, your knockoff isn't killing back, and then all of a sudden they're able to get that next Astral Barrage off, right? So these extra pieces, this ability to Terra stay on the field a little bit longer, even on offensive pieces, is I think something that is a little less explored, at least underexplored right now, right? Because like you see a lot of these Sash Terra Ghost Calyrexes at least early on, right? You just see a lot of these big damaging pieces be those big damaging pieces, which is arguably correct, right? If you're a big damaging piece, why would you not want to do big damage? But I also think there's a sense to be said that it makes it difficult for these balanced players to try and leverage out versus that when they have the defensive Terras, because normally we win trades off taking a bunch of damage or taking some damage and then dishing out more damage because we're positioning to super effective spots. We're positioning to our bigger moves, getting into your frailer Pokemon, right? Which becomes pretty difficult to position. That being said, though, I don't think the concept of a double restricted format is changing much. From when I started playing back in 2016, the concept there was, you got your two big restricted, you pick the two restricted you want. Generally, they tend to complement each other. There's a million different ways you could consider them complementing each other. I'm not going to get into that. Generally, those two restricted, you'd want them to complement each other. You generally want to have a piece that is either benefiting from those two restricteds or is completing that core of those two, right? So like I know like the Kyogre Zacians, for example, they love having that Scarf Urshifu. You get the Urshifu to help hit some of those fire types, Kyogre to set the rain for the Urshifu. That's a very solid core of three. After that, you tend to take your your next two slots, maybe your next three slots, but generally your next two, as these guys are going to support. These guys are going to make that first core three go. And you can see that a lot in the results of the VR tournament, right? You've got your two complementary restricteds, you've got the Pokemon on that core that really kind of completes the core, and then you got your supportish guys, right? And that's what we're seeing a lot in the metagame right now, and that's going to be how you build. And then that last slot is either something that you didn't have in earlier slots, like if I did fake out plus fake out, maybe my last slot wants to be tailwind, but it can also be that niche pick, right? Like where we're seeing like a ditto, right? Like you get that one slot. It's basically a wild card slot, and that's gonna fix how you approach the matchups, right? Like we could build the exact same 5-mon core, and maybe I don't like going up against Trick Room, so I'll put a Imprisoned Farigiraf. But maybe you don't like playing against opposing Tailwind, so you'll add your own Tailwind, right? Like it really just depends on that last slot kind of being that wild card, or really just allowing you to fix those issues in a way that you want to play the game. And that's generally what we're going to see in these restricted formats, right? You're going to get your core, you're going to get that extra Pokemon or that extra two Pokemon that are really going to complement that core. Then you're going to have your supports and probably a wild card if the opportunity allows for it. That has been double restricted since 2016. That doesn't change here, I don't think, right? In terms of what those cores are going to be, in terms of how we're going to break those cores because of terrestrialization and all that stuff, that's going to change, right? I don't think the fundamental concept of a double restricted format, though, however, is going to change. It's still going to be similar to stuff like that, and I think that's going to be I'm very curious to see how it plays as a terrestrialized double restricted format. It might be fun for a month and then completely suck. I don't know. But right now, I'm really looking forward to it because there is a lot you can do. You can do a lot with two restricteds because you're generally going to get a good core. And then you can kind of just have fun with the other four. And because those first two cover each other so well, if you can position, you might be all right, right? You can get away with some really wacky stuff.
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like since Sword and Shield now, like we have Incin, Rilla, Ursh, and I think that like at least two of them are like on most of the teams here, and you can really just like honestly you could slap two restricteds that work well together with Incin, Rilla, or like Rilla, Ursh, whatever it is, like two of those mons or
Yeah,
all three of those mons, and you have a solid team. Like you have a team that can win games, and I think like I'm excited to see meta that went past that, and like some of these cores that like maybe don't revolve around all three of those mons or two of those mons, and maybe some a little bit more variation, but um that's the exciting thing about I think this format is there's so many different combinations of restricteds and partner mons that can happen that I think we'll get to see some exciting development and some people show up to Milwaukee with the sauce, and then by the time we get to Worlds, hopefully some really cool teams. So very excited to see how this
yeah,
format plays out. All right,
agreed.
well I think
Yeah.
that's all I had for today, unless you had anything else you want to touch on.
No, not really. I mean, there's other things we could talk about, like underused restricted and all that jazz. But it's technically day negative 15 of the format,
Yeah.
so
So,
I think we can touch upon that next time because I think our next episode is going to be right before Milwaukee, so we can kind of take a look that way. Start seeing what we think is going to happen at Milwaukee, like do like a full on Reg Eye preview sort of thing after we have some more
yep.
online results, after we have some more build up there. So I think yeah, that pretty much covers everything, at least from my end as well.
Awesome, awesome. Well, excited to see how this goes and excited to see how the VR tour goes this weekend. But that's it for us this week. So thank you as always, for listening. Let us know what restricted duo is your favorite so far, and we will catch you right before Milwaukee.
See you guys.
Thanks, everyone.